Take it away, chef. Take it
Well,
away, chef.
Speaking of being ready,
Yes.
my initial question, I guess, kind of came about because I was feeling ready for kind of leveling up or being more serious about my personal practice. We'd been discussing the 2,000-hour training, and I was excited about the course of study and just about the opportunity to dive in a little more. So I tried to kind of schedule out when I could fit in certain activities, guitar being one of them. And I've just found it really difficult to actually get momentum started on that. So we kind of started discussing yesterday why that's the case, and maybe we can unpack it a little more today.
Mm-hmm. Great. Take it away, chef.
Well, you started by saying that criticism is necessary for growth yesterday. You told me that.
Mm-hmm.
And that we don't often, we pretty much never want to hear criticism. Mm-hmm. Nobody really wants that. Unless you've sort of been trained to know what to do with it or how to digest it and make it useful.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this was your criticism yesterday, but following that statement about criticism, you said that things only happen when they need to.
Mm-hmm.
Which maybe you're implying that whatever I think I want to practice, it's not happening yet because it doesn't need to, in a sense.
Okay, so I was saying the criticism thing because I think that just in my observation in general, let's say we're like doing a podcast, we're like kind of like half-assedly serious about it. But like, let's say just in podcast world or just any information transfer world, I think we wrote this idea, I think maybe you wrote this line in More Diamond, More Human, that in the information age, the problem isn't access to information. The problem is how to organize, interpret, classify, prioritize information. So what I think, what I see that's missing a lot is that there's no, like we're not like pointing to like the domain or the principle first. We're not being helpful in terms of organizing like where this question is coming from, like why it may or may not be important, and then pointing it back to some like concept. And then once the concept is seen clearly, then there would be associated techniques that like would basically help us come first to terms with the concept and then help us then experience that thing, right?
Like
and then that's answering a question, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, and answers to questions do not come in the form of information. They come in the form of an experience. And when that happens, then they don't have the question anymore. Kind of like that. So with respect, so I'm saying the criticism thing first is it's, my response was, or I mentioned the criticism because I was trying to set up for you're talking about wanting to get more serious than ever about practicing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the only way, or in other words, you really want to, make the most of life.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to make the most of anything, let's take any discipline at all, athletics, art, cooking, whatever, making cars, right? We have to acknowledge that there's a path, a movement toward maturity or mastery in that discipline,
Mm-hmm.
which is made up of stages that represent levels of our evolution, or evolution of our competence or understanding about things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In order for me to take another step forward, that means I have to face some challenge, or I have to enter some space where I really don't know what the hell I'm doing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying that's criticism. Let's just call it constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if we're really serious about moving toward mastery in some discipline, then one of the things that we have to come to terms with is that we'll have to ask for criticism. Hey, what can I do better? Something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to touch that first, because that is the prerequisite for growth, is to get somebody else's perspective who's been where we want to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So setting that up to then preface the other thing, which is, I think I was saying something like, so part of the thing about receiving criticism is we may get answers to our questions that we really don't want to hear. Right? I really don't want to hear that, actually. I really don't want to try to even wrap my mind around the possibility that the answer that's coming my way is the truth. Something like that.
Yeah.
Right? So I was just kind of being provocative also, but also it's interesting when we think about it, that we think that we want things. But what if it's the case that whenever we think that we want something, it's actually a need and not a want? And I was saying, do you want to eat food?
Yeah. Don't really have a choice.
Do you want to eat food, or do you need to eat food? So I was kind of like trying to just open a line of thinking
Mm-hmm.
in response to what you were thinking and talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is also then is this what you're considering to be a want actually part of a process, a natural process?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting to set it up like this, because I do feel in some way that most people are going to have a negative, even if it's slight, a negative emotional response to saying that they aren't choosing the things they want, that they're only doing things because they need to, and they really have no other choice ultimately. Like, you can't just not eat forever. You're going to die or something like that. But if you step back, it's kind of a good thing. It's not something that we need to condemn. And I think that will be made more clear the more we discuss this, like why it's actually helpful that things are need-based rather than just some choice.
Mm-hmm.
One, because it demonstrates something we've been talking about a lot lately, which is the universe fundamentally orderly or not? And I think that, the needs that we would identify that are common to all human beings, they indicate a certain orderliness about the universe. And they also, sort of by inference, indicate that there's like a structured development of a human being, which I think we'll also get to eventually. So anyway, I'm just thinking about how I or others might perceive the idea that, I'm not choosing my life, or I'm not choosing what I want to do, it's just happening to me, but that may not be so bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay. We talked a little yesterday about the prerequisites, the considerations that would be helpful to sort of prepare someone to become more serious about their practice, for example. Do you want to get into that?
Did we mention what they were?
Well, I mean, you brought up, is the universe orderly? Things like that.
Questions like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, we haven't done one of these in a while, I guess, where we sat and tried to think about things. I think, just to try to contextualize, I think it's important to provide context as often as possible. Again, because I think we've talked about like movement before, and we all understand that we can, like, our bodies are moving, right? Our bodies are moving. That's what I used to say to my baseball players. Like, if you want a certain outcome to happen, then you have to move your body in a certain way, right? If you move your body in a very, very systematic way, with a certain intention, with a certain level of also intensity and consistency, there will be some outcome that you want, right? Movement can be organized in such a way as to produce something that's pretty amazing, right? We can move our bodies in a certain way, or move around in a certain way as to produce something pretty amazing. I can walk deliberately out of the house into the car. I can drive in a certain way, and I can go to Whole Foods or something and buy fruit, right? Versus it just moves around like crazy.
Yeah.
There's a random movement, or whatever. And so again, because we, if I'm again if I'm shooting, provocation shots or whatever, I'm firing provocation shots. Like, we don't really have an education system, really. And so we're not introduced to this type of thinking enough, or we're trying to contextualize life as often as possible. So our mind, when we say the word mind, it's like saying the word body, right? When I say body, you know that means eyes, hair. It means all these things, right? When I say the word mind, because we don't have an education system that has really dug into mind, we're throwing all these different components of mind at once into there.
Which components?
Well, like imagination, memory, and all the classic things, right? Organization of concepts, right? Like labeling, whatever the fuck, right? So the mind, like the body, is in motion, and it is comprised of other component parts that are also like undergoing processes, right? So similarly, what I was saying about, we were talking about fundamental concepts or whatever, is that if we were to move our minds in a systematic way with a certain intention, a level of intensity, consistency, and so on, it would also produce this other outcome. So now I'm saying that to say that, this is why statements like Bob will make statements, or if you really dig into legit heavy-duty teachers from any tradition, Socrates, anybody, if you are going to have success, like real success as a human being, like legit, real success, as like to come to terms with the magic of being human, to experience the magic of being human, the prerequisite is thinking critically, learning to think critically, which basically, or in other words, is learning to move the mind in a certain way as to produce a certain outcome. In the same way, and we would want to do that, we would want to learn to do that when we think critically about the fact that what we want to do with our bodies is move them in a certain way as to produce desired outcomes, like consistent, healthy, constructive, desired outcomes. Okay, so that's what I mean about prerequisites. So one of the prerequisites for being a serious student is as much time as possible spent thinking critically, but thinking critically in a structured way, like following a certain educational process. It's not just random thinking critically about this, that, whatever, right? And that's also then why, again, in tradition, let's take an obvious tradition like Tibetan Buddhism, there's so much focus on Lam Rim, stages of the path. Like, we think critically in a certain way, like step by step. We're coming to terms with this concept because this concept, or like that concept, logically follows this concept, kind of thing, kind of
like
idea.
You said before with the recipe, you don't go out of order with the steps to baking a cake because
Right.
it won't turn out right.
It just is irrational to say it's impossible to try to bake a cake out of order. It's impossible for me to think that I can go to Whole Foods like right now. I have to follow an order. This is also why universe is orderly. Like, again, trying to come to terms with that. So then the same thing about becoming a serious student, becoming a serious practitioner. If we follow a certain, if we want to do that, then there's a certain payment that we have to make. In the same way that if you want to play varsity baseball or become a doctor, there's a certain payment, right?
What,
a payment of time and energy and
okay.
Right, and study. So it's like that. And then if you were to flip the coin over, if we were to make the payment, then the inevitability is then that thing shows up, right? So then I'm saying, what I was saying, shooting or firing provocation shots is that if we want something and it's not happening, it's because we have not initiated the process that makes that thing inevitable, or in other words, necessary. Right? When my mom and dad conceived me, they initiated the process of inevitability. That's my hunger now, actually. Right?
Yeah.
My hunger is the necessity. It's the inevitable, necessary fact of another thing that was caused. You dig? So, anyway.
So my question is actually a question about technique for how to initiate the process that will help me gather momentum on being serious about my practice.
Yeah, so then I was saying it's actually really empowering when we move our mind in a certain way, specifically when we start to examine what we think we want, quote unquote.
Okay.
Right? because I think that I want to eat food.
But you need to.
I need to, not only do I need to eat food, so do you, so does every human being needs to do that. And breathe air. And if we go up another level, there would be no human beings if there were no process of conception, procreation, sexual attraction. So, since human beings originate in that is a necessity also, right? It's not that I want to have sex. No, this is a force that plays through me, right? And so is survival. And then again, if we were to take it up another level, am I the only one who wants to do something constructive or succeed at something? Or like, even, am I the only one that quote unquote wants to do what I want to do? Right? No. If someone, like, do you want someone to just put you in a little cell and close the door and lock the door and not let you do what you want to do? You'd rather die, isn't it? So it's not like you kind of want that. It's like this is something that you need to do. And look, the reality is that we forgot that we need to do these things because we have it so good. Right? If we were really squeezed, and this is another conversation, but if we really were to squeeze ourselves like hard, then we would discover, damn, this is not something that I want. You know, live free or die kind of thing. Live free or die. Or what I mean to say is, no, this is a essential. I would rather die than not be able to do this. Or in some, So then if we go up another level, like, am I the only one that wants, quote unquote, to have friends, companionship? Like, or over a long enough timeline, is that something that if that were denied to me, it would feel like dying, and or it may even induce some biological process or some mental process by which I would want to kill myself and or I would literally die, So what I'm saying is that it's really empowering when we start to see that what we think we want, quote unquote, are actually these like transcendent, all-permeating forces that actually make this experience possible and are like kind of pushing us forward towards some end, some wonderful end, actually, Anyway, I'm saying this is like, it's extremely liberating to at least grasp that concept intellectually. And it also is a precursor to other questions, Anyway, I don't know if I'm going off topic or whatever.
No, I think it's a good context. One thing we discussed yesterday was how it's almost like each of those needs, the force that causes those needs, represents a certain developmental stage. And in each of our lives, maybe a couple of them or one in particular will be playing out most forcefully or most obviously or something like that. And you mentioned yesterday that when we find ourselves on the cusp of a new developmental stage, then it can be sometimes difficult to know how to interact with that new force and how to sort of capture the energy and assimilate it and make sense of it without being erratic in our relationship to that need. And I think that would kind of bring us full circle to my original question about maybe how to make my relationship or anyone's relationship to a practice less erratic, more structured, more like having a rhythm.
I think we were also saying that, I mean, I think this is a good way to think about it, that those forces, or we call them drives or satiation cycles or whatever, they're literally like gods, right? They're literally like gods, and the gods like live through us. Like when hunger shows up, there's a god that is about to find its expression through me, through my actions. Like when we want to get jiggy, there's a literal God that's showing up in me that's about to find its life expression through me. When I want to aim at something, orient myself towards becoming successful in something, and I start to do that, that literally is a God that is in me that is beginning to find / continuing to find its life expression through me. Right? When I really have an intense, when I meet a best friend, or I'm like, whoa, this person is friendly, or I'm having a longing for companionship, that is a God that's showing up in me that is about to find its ever continuing life expression through me, right? And so yeah, I forgot to say this. I think this is how we got on the topic. So I was referring to the quote that it's not me, it's the Father in me that doeth the works. It's not me doing it, quote unquote. It's the Father in me that doeth the works, like that. Like that sums up the sovereign, like the graduation into sovereignty is summed up in that statement, but it's also referring to anything that we're doing whatsoever is a God, quote unquote, doing something through me. Now, then the question is, well, am I doing anything, or is there a me there or something, you know? And the answer is, well, as we make effort to relate to the gods, we are moving toward sovereignty. And when we graduate into sovereignty, then we become the ruler of the gods, meaning we graduate into a level of maturity wherein we can govern wisely or ensure constructive interaction between the gods, or manage them, quote unquote.
Like yesterday we were saying, sort of there are the 6 main gods or needs or drives or satiation cycles.
Sure.
And the 7th is the one that kind of keeps them in line, rules wisely, justly.
Yeah.
Kind of keeps the harmony and helps them refine their expression in terms of how they relate to others and how interactions happen.
Yeah. Yeah, so, again, now I'll just try to full circle. So if we had the habit of thinking about our lives as a gradual unfoldment of our capacity to manage the energies that show up and try to live through us, right? Then we would also start to have some understanding that, let's say, because what we haven't touched on is also, if we were to just extend the concept out a little bit, essentially what we're talking about is evolution of consciousness, or in traditional terms, the movement toward enlightenment, with the inevitable movement toward enlightenment, because we're human beings, because human beings have been marked, like, let's say if we had like spiritual DNA, like one of the qualities or attributes of being human is that we have spiritual DNA. And just like we have genetic DNA that's like passed down in a biological line, the human spiritual DNA isn't passed down literally biologically, but is actually passed in a soul sense or something. So like this is the idea of like the savior of the savior. Like if a human being becomes enlightened, then you're actually stamping the spiritual DNA of all humans. So anyway, this is the idea. I mean, again, a different tangent, but it's part of the concept of the evolutionary movement, or the theory of the evolution of consciousness in traditional terms, is that we can't escape our movement toward enlightenment, which is the good news. So then, step by step, we're coming to terms with these other stages, right? Like step one is we learn how to like manage our health of our bodies, health of our finances. Step two is we start to learn how to manage the health of our emotions, right? Step three is we start to really learn how to manage the health of our mind, which is to think critically about things. Step four is we start to learn how to manage our relationships with other people, like, and if we were to again go back, we can see the structure of this. Like, if I were physically healthy, I could successfully go to work and manage my time and money. If I understood that my emotions are a force that plays through me, and sometimes they're going to be a little bit like maybe really high, or kind of sometimes they're going to go towards lower, or sometimes they're going to make me want to feel like all these things, and I'm understanding that's a movement, and I can kind of learn to compress a little bit. I can take the lows away. I don't have to necessarily seek out the highs. I don't necessarily have to act on this impulse towards whatever, a feeling, a vibe, something. Like I start to learn how to manage that. I start to learn how to manage the way that my mind is moving around. Sometimes it's like, maybe it's thinking about something and it's producing some feeling, or it's like thinking about something else and it's producing some other feeling, So if I had my shit together in body and emotion and mind, my ability to relate to other people would go way up, right? I'd be much more successful in my relationships, right?
Can I jump in really quick?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like what you're describing is examples of developing healthy relationships to each of those gods, or each of those cycles.
Yes.
Which is, I think what you're saying is that, like with each developmental stage, really seems like the only task, or at least the main task, is to develop a healthy relationship to it, and learn what it's about. But then, are you also saying that? I mean, we've kind of said this before, but is it sort of like you have to complete each stage as a foundation for the next?
You could think of it as establishing a default level of health, but also notice that if we're thinking about chakras or whatever, right? Notice that the first three are individual. And then once you get up to the heart, or the fourth, it becomes collective. So step by step, if I were to succeed in establishing that default health, body, emotion, mind, then spontaneously I'd be able to relate to other people in a way that was consistently constructive also.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily get involved or make agreements. I wouldn't get involved in ways or make agreements that were not
Mutually beneficial.
Right. Like impossible, actually. Impossible, right?
Yeah.
And then if I were to make an agreement or having a relationship that was incredible, right? Then that would open me up to something else about like, wow, the beauty of connection or something, right? And then I would get a taste of this fifth tier.
Mm-hmm.
I would see the beauty of things, you know? Like, you know what I'm saying? And then the artistic level of the artistic stage would then begin.
Mm-hmm.
Something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I don't want to, get too lofty about it, but it's like, does that make sense first? Where can I think of?
Well, I guess I feel like there's got to be kind of a simple technique or something to, at the end of the day, answer my initial question, like in a straightforward way. And I know that the context is necessary.
Yeah.
And it is helpful, but I just still feel like there's something obvious or something, that's like duh that I'm just not doing or I'm not thinking about or.
I think that if you were to try to rephrase your question, so let's just go from the top, right? If we're thinking about gods coming to life through us,
Mm-hmm.
we can think about which ones that we relate to.
Which ones we have good relationships
Yeah,
with?
kind of like that. Like which ones we're starting to be able to interact with in a way that represents a positive relationship, something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like in other words, which ones we're really intimate with, which ones we know really well.
Mm.
Which ones do we really know well? Right? It's not like a music festival. Just like some 2 nights of crazy and then like it's never around anymore.
Mm. There's a consistency.
Right? It's like around, like I know, yeah. Like they live with you.
Mm-hmm.
You're married or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not giving you a straight answer because I'm trying to help you see that it's about you're trying to increase your proximity to the thing.
Yeah. Well, no, the fact that you're not giving me an answer is helpful actually because it's making me think, it's making me analyze or just think honestly about my relationship to the gods or the desires or whatever.
Yeah. So let's just touch those really quickly because I mean it's in more human, the satiate whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The god of survival, the god of pleasure, the god of success, right? These three, or, there's always like the three temptations of something or other. It's always those three things,
The
essentially.
personal ones.
Violence, lust, and greed, or the
Ignorance.
or tyranny,
like
or
that.
something like this, right? It's like just something like that.
Yeah.
There's always those three things that we have to. Those represent. If we can position ourselves or orient ourselves in a way that is, or help those forces orient themselves towards something consistently positive, then we graduate into another stage, right? Then we graduate into the heart, let's say, where we become a friend. Not just a friend to this person, but we can become anybody's friend. We can care about someone now.
I have to stop you really quick because
Okay.
actually something you just said, it really clicked. You said that we orient the forces. And earlier in the conversation, you said, does it mean that we don't have, or what does it mean for our own personal identity that, these gods are playing out through us, something like that. And I guess when you said that just now about orienting the force, it makes sense to me that whatever we are, or whatever our identities are composed of, it's something that can orient those forces. Those forces are just that. They're not good or bad inherently, but it's our job, it's our task to orient them in a certain way. A force is just a force, like electricity. And you can direct it through cables. It can be lightning that just strikes the ground. You have to somehow orient it in a particular direction. And it seems like there's a relationship between our ability to orient the forces constructively and securing our developmental stage in each, and potentially graduating into the next stage of development as a being, is our ability to orient the forces that are playing out through us.
That's good.
I just had to stop you because that was cool.
It's like judo or something. I don't know. There's like the martial art where there's like a lot of throws.
Yeah.
And like someone can come towards you with a certain level of force, and you can just like kind of step or position something or drop your shoulder. I don't know. Put your foot there, and their force kind of just goes, and you can just then grab their arm and something like that.
Yeah. Just physics.
It's it.
Yeah.
It's just spiritual physics.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah. So then we're saying, first things first is health, body, general stability, body, financial stability, emotions, interestingly enough, have their roots in how we think about things. I think about this, now I'm angry, I think about this, now I feel great or something,
It's so hard to separate those things.
Right. So those things, and then not just that our emotions have their roots in how we're thinking, but that we can learn to think in a certain way, that we can learn to think about things in a certain way that clears up the emotions 100%, and that motivates us to become healthier and to become more financially responsible. So it's like a big thing. It's a big deal, right? And then when we succeed in doing that, by default, we will become more attractive to other people. And we will start to also feel more stable just in our own experience of things, which will also be more attractive to other people. So so I'm saying 1, 2, 3, then 4. How our ability to interact with others in a constructive way will start to produce real sense of meaning of life, right? Which will then push us into step 5, where we want to write poetry about how beautiful life is, or we want to sing songs about how we were something, or I identify with someone else's suffering. I'm starting to open as my heart opens to other people, my artistic talents also begin to emerge. Right? Okay. And then this gets lofty, but then as we grow artistically, and we're trying to comment on how beautiful or difficult, or we're trying to comment on life, we're trying to encapsulate it with our hands and hearts and mind, whatever. Then the mystical stuff, the mystics, or the seeker, I think I would say more technically, the life of the seeker opens out of the artist. You start to tap into shit, and then you have real questions, existential questions, something like this. Seeker or philosopher kind of thing out of artist. But it's the seeker, the force. So you have the force of love, obviously, out of the heart, a friend. I really care about you, something like this. And out of the force of that is the force of beauty. Out of the force of beauty, then, is the sense of awe, or in other words, humility. That's why the seeker's job, quote unquote, is to surrender to the divine state of things, or whatever, right? You have to give up your ego. It has to be supplanted. Or in other words, it's not me that do it, it's the Father in me. Finally, it's the Father in me. It's not me. I'm not here anymore. Now that thing is inside. Something like this, right? So that's the trajectory that we're all on, whether we know it or not. Is the So then the task is, our first task is to try to really be honest about where we are in that space. And also it's to recognize that it's not like you can't eat one burger and then not have to worry about the God of survival. It's an ongoing thing, right? It's like, or in other words, it's a principality, it's a political zone that's active, and there's people doing shit. In other words, there's gods active, and they have to be governed. So it's not like I can do one thing once and I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to manage that anymore. Right? It's like, I'm aware that it's doing something. I'm aware that I can, water a plant or something. If I don't give it attention, the right type of attention at the right times, then it gets distorted. It's, throws a tantrum. It mutiny, or, it's like revolt over there kind of thing. Our mind revolts, our emotions revolt, my body will revolt, something like this. Something like this. But so this is the thing. It's only those first three that can revolt. Right? Love cannot revolt. Right? Beauty cannot revolt. Humility cannot revolt. So there's a fundamental, like a transcendent shift that happens once we actually graduate into the heart. That's why all the religion, whatever, the lesson of being human is to actually be able to open our heart. Like actually. But that can't actually, legit happen. We get tastes of it or something. If you have a kid and you're like, oh, now I know what my meaning is about or something. But that's like a taste of it. It's not like actually opening. The actual opening that is the natural process of having our mind really, really together and our emotions really, really together and a physical really, really together. Because then it's like, oh, I don't, it's like everybody takes advantage of me, but I feel everyone's pain, but everyone takes advantage of me, or I don't have any boundaries or something, It's like all of that shit, it would be impossible to understand that love is both open arms and a closed door, right?
Right. So that perspective you just described, like I feel everyone's pain, but everyone takes advantage of me. It's actually an indication of that there's still work to do in the first
Right.
three.
So I'm having it. I'm. It's like you know, light creeping through the shades. I'm aware of this thing that's coming. Right. So to your question, I'm aware that there's this force entering my life, but I can't actually know it, become completely intimate with it, because there's these other things that still need to get adjusted, right? Or I always use the example of like a drug addict. Like I love the drug addict. Is the best thing to do to give the drug addict money? Probably not. Is the best thing to do to say, I love you and I got to close the door? Probably that's the best thing to do. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's complicated, but I'm setting it up to say that when that foundation is actually established, that it won't be confusing, won't be as confusing when the newer lights start to peek through the shades. I'm saying because it is natural, or in other words, orderly, or in other words, necessary. Necessary and natural and orderly are it's the same word. It's trying to convey the same thing. And like, you know, the plants are doing something, right? Like, it's natural for the plants to do something to sunlight, right? And then it's like,
it's also necessary,
right?
And it's also orderly,
right? So I'm saying then when we really are like thoroughly, like when our relationship is thoroughly intimate with each stage, then the let's say the incoming or the oncoming stage, or the next stage, will unfold like essentially on its own. You know, so let's say, for example, someone thinks like I'm a seeker. Like I know I'm a seeker because, like, when I think about it, the thing that feels most meaningful to me is to, like, you know, read and study and think about these cultures or these ideas or something like that, right? Something like that. And, you know, like every now and then, you know, I've called it like a religious feeling, like when the religious feeling like lives through us, or that seeker, the God of seekerness lives inside of us. It feels so great or something, right? It's like, this is the meaning of my life or something. It's like, where did that come from? Right? Is it just random, like just shit randomly moving, right? So then it's like if we work backwards, we can start to see how these things actually show up, emerge. Or in other words, like I've called it their phone number. Like, you want to get in touch with Seeker God, because when Seeker God comes to visit, it's so amazing. And we really want that one to be there, right? It's like, well, how do I actually, what are the numbers? How do I dial that person up? Step one, does my body feel healthy? Step two, emotionally, like, is it joyful in there? Is it peaceful? Is it positive? Mentally, have I been engaging in a certain type of critical thinking, right? Am I doing now? Am I trying to open my heart out to other people? When I open my heart out to other people, does some artistic thing show? You know, so it's like that's, or in other words, you ever heard of people like in competitive arenas, like someone has someone's number, you know, like I got this person's number, or like pitcher Like a pitcher strikes out this hitter like all the time. The pitcher has his number, or something like that. Or this
like
fighter. It's a figure of speech. Like I know this. I know how to get this person.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, is there's a certain recipe that we can initiate that produces an inevitability. And if we know what the recipe is, then by default it'll happen every time.
Yeah.
Because shit isn't random, I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's all. And I think that you mean to say when you say you want to take your practice more seriously is that maybe what you are saying, or correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a certain energy that shows up sometimes that, and when it's there, like you're certain that this is the meaning and like this is your path or this is your calling, something like that. Like this is the thing that makes me feel most alive. And when it's there, I'm answered. I'm certain. But then it's not there. You know, and it's like, I don't know. I don't really know so much anymore. And then, but when it's there, I'm like, yeah, this is the thing, you know, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Right? So, it's like that.
Yeah, I also feel, at least in the background, this sense of like always wanting to just hurry up.
I'm listening.
That's it.
But what do you mean hurry up?
I mean, I don't even know how else to describe it. It's like this feeling of like, I don't know, like being worried that I'm wasting time.
Yeah, this is good. Yes, this is good.
Like that. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's always there.
This is good.
And I think there's a relationship between that feeling and the drive that sometimes comes up that wants to be more serious about practice or something like that.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
This is good. Again, if we were educated properly, then we would not. So like there again, what you were just describing is an energy that comes from somewhere, right? And when that energy is there, your mind, one of the things that your mind does when the energy is there is try to classify it, label it something, interpret it, right? And when that energy, let's call it sense of urgency. Let's just call that energy sense of urgency. Okay. When sense of urgency is inside of you, your mind is interpreting it as like a bad thing or not necessarily
sort of restless or
something like that,
or something,
right? Or whatever. As opposed to thinking about, okay, actually this energy is the answer, is one of the answers to my prayer for getting serious about things. Because how can you get serious about something? I'm saying when we say serious, like, you know, for sports fans, when we say serious, I'm talking about fourth quarter, 30 seconds to go. You know, you're down, let's say basketball because it's March Madness. It's the second half. It's March Madness. It's the Final Four. You're planning to go to the championship game. You're down 2 points with 30 seconds to go, and you're getting the ball out of a timeout, right? That's serious. How are you going to actually show up and play if there's no sense of urgency?
Or excitement, or passion,
right,
or energy,
right,
or
whatever. So the sense of urgency even shows up is a God responding to your call. That is a God that hears you sending the bat signal out, and it shows up. Right? Okay. Oh, the sense of urgency is here now. Yeah. Now I'm gonna fucking go. Like now, okay, yeah, this is a good thing. This is reminding me that all this other shit is not what the fuck I'm here to do. I'm not condemning that. It's fine. Whatever it is going on is fine. But this is where I am. This is what I want to do. I'm going to do it. I'm going to sit down and write. Or whatever it is.
So then I think
practically speaking, like when that energy is there, it's there for you to use it, to do something with it, play, express, or whatever.
Yeah, and then I guess if there's something that I can identify, a habit that prevents me from interacting with that energy in a way that like makes sense, it's that like if there's one thing to work on, it's maybe you could call it like establishing boundaries or making decisions or whatever. I always say, and you always say, I just want to do everything, and you can't do everything. So got to make a decision. What's the most important? And it seems like that might help.
I'm saying like if we were to really, there's like a big stress, especially in the Western esoteric tradition, about the mind, like everything is mind or whatever, right? I'm saying if we were to actually engage in a certain type of movement of mind, right? I mean, even in yoga, Tibetan Buddhism, general Buddhism, Socrates, if we were to engage in a certain movement of mind, aka, or in other words, to ask certain questions like, what should I really be doing with my time? What's the most meaningful thing to do with my time? Like for real. Like, does it make sense to get involved in things, in the world without understanding why the hell I'm doing it? I mean, for real. I mean, this is the beginning of, this is the renunciate tradition. It's like, what doesn't it make more sense to try to think about whether or not we think that, I'll use first person. Doesn't it make more sense for me to think about whether or not I, quote unquote, am going to continue living when this body leaves? Or let me say, doesn't it make sense to think about that? And doesn't it make sense to think about that, or think about certain, principles such as cause and effect? Doesn't it make sense to think about whether or not I'd like my future to get better or worse? And all this shit, right? So it's like, okay, then if I think that I am going to continue and that I would like it to continually getting better, and that therefore I need to learn how to ensure that it gets continually better, like all that should happen first.
Yeah. I guess the challenge is real time maintaining a healthy relationship to all of the satiation cycles, and also thinking about that. There's only 24 hours in a day. Well,
this is what I'm saying. The mind, like, here's one of the things that is, a gauntlet, right? I mean, and again, I just mentioned it. This is why there is a renunciate tradition. Like, if we're just going to keep going, and we want the keeping going to continue to get more meaningful, better, or whatever, we want to be in a position to be more helpful to people and all of that. Like, maybe I should just be a monk so that I can get my mind right. Because if I get my mind right, that means I get my emotions right. That means I get my motivation right.
But is it necessary to become a monk to get your mind
right? I'm not saying that anything is necessary to do. I'm not saying that it's necessary to do that in order to do that. What I'm saying is that if we had our mind right, let's say, then we wouldn't be confused about how much time
Yeah.
we should spend working.
Mm-hmm.
Or how much time we should spend doing anything. I would know exactly how much time I need to do this thing and this thing and this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what I need to do in order to get my watery elements like straight.
Okay.
Right?
So if I need a little more practice getting my mind right so that I feel more clear about how to organize my time or whatever,
Right.
then is there a simple answer to that? Or
Well, then there are things that we have to do with our mind.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that if you want to get your body right, there's a certain workout that you have to do.
Yeah.
If I want to get my mind right, there's a certain workout I have to do.
So can you prescribe me?
Yeah. So for example, precious human life.
Mm-hmm.
There's a go to the mind gym and do precious human life, imminent death. You know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's it.
Okay.
And then I'll throw another one in there. I'll fire. Damn it! I keep missing it. I will shoot one more. I will fire another provocation shot. Do what you need to do. Do what you're here to do. Be selfish, in other words. If you want to sit and paint all day, do it. If you want to read books all day, if you want to write, essays about whatever, right? I'm saying even if you just want to sit and meditate about love, if you want to become a nun, whatever. Like there's a certain once we graduate into the stage where we actually do care about other people and we understand how to do that properly. There's no problem
being selfish,
right, and renouncing the world, quote unquote, at that point, or in art, or in prayer, living your whole life in prayer. Like,
but then it's actually like at that point, it actually becomes really difficult to renounce the world because, part of leaving that stage is grappling with the feeling of like, I can't leave because, then I don't know, I'm so programmed to respond, X, Y, and Z ways to other people that now I feel, obligated to be there for them or obligated to talk to this person once a week or something like that.
Yeah, but
it's
it
difficult
also
to separate.
It also doesn't. Again, when your mind is right, it doesn't become difficult to make any decision because you're able to thoroughly analyze what the hell it is that you want to do. Now, let's say in this case, what I want to do or what you want to do is become most helpful to people, right? Then you have to think, well, what the hell is it that I can do that would be most helpful to people? Like, for real. We'll give someone $20. Like, say a nice thing or two at a restaurant every now and then.
Yeah.
And that's not really helpful. You know what's most helpful is if I become enlightened.
Yeah. And I'm just saying, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it's difficult to grapple with that real time, which is why you said it's a gauntlet.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, in the moment, there's still a lingering feeling of like, oh, I should do this thing. And I know what Joseph Campbell says about shoulds.
Yeah.
So I know that's, maybe for me, that's like a mind workout, actually.
Sure.
Just to...
You're thinking about these things, you're thinking about, well, shit, actually, if I want to be most helpful, then maybe, if I think enlightenment is possible, then that's pretty helpful. And this is why why monks do what they're doing. They're aiming for that. Also, they're not aiming for that just for no reason. They understand that actually, if I want to help somebody, I have to be capable of offering that person a perspective to help that person, quote unquote, become educated, or in other words, just ignite the natural common sense, the indwelling genius, I call it. Just help that person self-ignite the indwelling genius. That's the very best thing that we can do for anybody.
Yeah.
Right now, in order to do that, I have to be able to communicate to people, right? And so you start working backwards. You know, it's like kind of both things, you know? Big picture, small picture, big picture, small picture. I have to myself, if I want to become capable of educating, I have to be educated, okay? And if I really want to get close enough to be able to educate, then I have to also speak certain type of languages that other people admire. So then I'm starting to work my way back to the world. Maybe I work through art first. Maybe now I'm just kind of a friendly person or something. But I can do all of those things if I need to, you know, something like this. But the antidote would be to just remember precious human life, imminent death. You know?
Yeah.
And then if we find ourselves, you know, if again, this is also why one of the mind exercises is concentration, quote unquote, or in other words, the ability to
Direct your attention.
Yeah, but more importantly, the ability to observe, like sustained observation. In other words, intense, sustained observation. Right? Because then I'm really aware of when that God that I really like to visit, when I really like when a certain God visits, I'm super aware of when that God is on its way. And like I'm super aware of the feeling of it, like when it's there. I'm super aware of when it starts to leave, something like that, you know? And then, you know, you can start to track it basically. Or like I was saying, you can start to get its number down. And then you're never out of, I could just send a text real quick. You know, you're never uncertain about what, like your relationship has been stamped, like it's sealed in place. You know what I'm saying? It's like this. Then it's there. And then when it's there, then it's like this. But, you know, having its number also will mean that you are aware of the chain reaction that induces it, but then there's also a very specific act that it requires. Right? Let's say for the seeker, that specific act is prayer, basically. That's basically what it is. And you know, so I mean, and prayer is basically a, you know, an intense, heartfelt appeal to become like the very, very best you can be in order to steward other people, in order to serve other people, in order to help guide other people toward their best selves, basically. That's basically what prayer is. You're appealing to, you know, you're just sending out an intense, heartfelt appeal for whichever deity is that you've identified to work with, to help you become the very best you can be so that you can help others become the very best that they can be. That's praying, basically. Yes. And then when we're doing this, it is like unlocking all these other things, isn't it? Like this. It is like this. Yes. Anyway.
Thank you.
Nope, 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 nope.